looks like he's just pulled off on the side of the road. But oh, he's had problems again then. With that, and I wonder if it's that Ford engine again causing them a few problems. Red Bull starting that engine company from scratch not all that long ago, so even to be here with a working power unit and one that can deploy so well is a great achievement, but reliability may be evading them.
But that's crucial. Two down. Come here, F3 don't come here. So for him to only have one practice session is going to be tough, but to not even get halfway through the session, and that is 100% session done for him, that's not an ideal start at all for him.
We're going to go down to Ruth Buscombe in the pits in a moment. I just want to see the end of this lap with Charles Leclerc in the Ferrari. It's going to be, I think, the fastest lap we've seen so far.
To learn the track.
Of course, going on the see the faster runs until a little bit later in the session. Comes a little bit wide across that corner. Look for that for track limits later in the day. And Leclerc goes second with a 34.7. But Ruth has found her way down to Racing Bulls in the pit lane. Maybe to get an
simulator,
update on what's gone on.
Which he would have done is a massive help, but there's nothing like that.
Thank you. Get down at the end of this exceptionally long and wide pit lane. And we have an absence of Formula One car. Running as high as P3. His first race has been strong in Bahrain winter testing, but the power unit in the back of that car, obviously the same as the power unit in the back of that Red Bull racing car, had a couple of issues. First off, we saw Liam Lawson off the start line having some issues with the battery. We then also saw
second VSC of the session so far. That is
obviously throughout several of the races with Isaac Hadjar with the Red Bull. So question marks more than answers. These debriefs are so critical to the engineers, because often we can't diagnose when the car is switched off what is going on. We have to wait a bit like an airplane.
I was about to say, talk us through what's going on here.
Until we get it back on track. That is going to be at the end of the session. So any kind of snippets that your driver, as you can see, can give there to his race engineer,
that grey, smoky, steaming stuff
potentially diagnose what's the problem. It is now a race against time in order to be able to understand
that suggests
as much as they can in terms of setup. And what I actually really like there is that Isaac is going to get onto that spare seat on the pit wall, plug in and follow along on the session, so he can listen to his teammate Liam Lawson throughout the rest of the session. I really like that from a driver. It shows they're really locked in, even through no fault of his own. It looked like a bit of an electrical issue. I think his teammate's just about to box now, JP, so I'm going to have to tell you to switch around, and back to you guys.
Wow, thanks for that, Ruth. Fascinating insight from down there in the pit lane. I'm Sam Collins, Formula One technical analyst. I'm joined in the commentary box here by Alice Powell. Alice is, I think, driver, coach and manager. I think that understates your role. But before we get on to you, Alice, just watch
for the RB team.
Leclerc. I think we're about to see that wing pop open. It doesn't get old, does it?
No, it doesn't. All sorted. And actually, the shot that we caught at the very start of the session with both Ferraris back to back with the wing opening, and there we go. They are closing it earlier than we thought, because of course we saw Lewis Hamilton have that spin down into turn 6 when it was closing slightly late. So as Jolien mentioned, it's going to have in the last sector on the drivers to maybe close that slightly earlier as well, because they were yellow flag out.
It's a big learning experience for the teams and the drivers, and something a lot of people have noticed, and you'll see it in a moment, I suspect, that the front wing and the rear wing close at slightly different times. It's only a matter of a split second.
Antonelli,
in that moment, the car has a completely different aerodynamic.
He was fastest in the first and second sector.
If the driver does something different, turns in a different way,
third
that can cause the car to twitch or move in a way that they don't expect. And I think we might have just seen that on a little bit of the rear facing of Leclerc's camera as he sets his fastest lap of the session so far. Now, Alice, you've been watching some other very fast drivers on this circuit earlier today, haven't you?
Yeah, we had F1 Academy out earlier on today. Track was really dusty for them. Track evolution is high here anyway, but I expect that come towards the end of the session, you can see actually Leclerc's out there, for example, 12 laps on the board now compared to George Russell's 9. Just keeps getting quicker and quicker. Won't necessarily be just down to track evolution, but he'll be progressing. Let's have a look with Lando Norris, who's been bumped down into 5th. There's Ollie Behrman's jumped up to 4th. This is where the first part of the plane kicks in for that front left, and a swap of oversteer there for Lando. Plenty of runoff on the outside. As you can see, rear end saying no. Slight lock up for the front right as well.
That was a curious one. He was
off for the yellows.
Too early for marbles, so just gone to a dirtier part of the
track.
track.
It's so dirty out there. I spoke to some of the F1 Academy drivers yesterday, and they were testing here behind his teammate George Russell, and they said they just can't believe how dusty the circuit is, even compared to when they were here. Yeah, like I said, 3 weeks ago. So that dust is still going to be out there. Slightly wide. You can see where the circuit's rubbed in.
Russell ahead of Antonelli.
And if you do go slightly off that, and particularly on the left-hand side there, that's where you will swap ends. And let's see, George Russell
Oliver Behrman in the
legs even
in
more
4th
and top of the timesheets.
Well, I think we saw Russell just having another moment slightly wide there as well. Charlotte, I just like seeing the drivers fighting the cars this year, which you haven't seen for a while. And Charlotte Leclerc in 4th, Isaac coming in, but with the higher energy usage rates, that's what the team's going to be playing with in this session, understanding what they can get out of the power units under these slightly revised 5th gas sets of restrictions on the cars. 9 megajoules allowed in some sessions this weekend. That means they can basically, putting it into layman's terms, you can just push the battery in the hybrid system a bit harder than you did in Melbourne. And that will make a difference to how the car performs around the track, particularly. Shows us, I think, that this isn't a particularly representative session.
It will. Heavier braking zones around here compared to Melbourne, particularly turn 1, turn 6, down into 11, and then the long
so far, but it's been
straight down into 14. That's certainly going to help with the regeneration, which is obviously one of the other reasons where they're allowed to regenerate more in a lap, more battery, as you said, for the drivers to play with.
And this is the blending of the officially 50-50 split. And for drivers who maybe don't know this circuit so well, quite 50-50 split because the combustion engine has a little bit more power than the electric motor at the moment, and balancing the two of them is the strategy that a lot of these teams are still trying to work out. And all of that data from Melbourne and from testing in Bahrain and the shakedown in Barcelona, that's all being fed into those. You mentioned the simulators. Every team has got different software, what they call the teams have back at base, to try to learn how to set up the car. And I think the real secret to Formula 1 at the start of this year, everyone's saying, oh, it's very different, the power units, some people aren't a fan of them, some drivers don't particularly like it. But then, Alice, you wouldn't like a car that's not properly set up at all, would you?
Oh, no. No, definitely not. As Oscar Piastri, now, he's after a much better weekend last time out. You can see here on the onboard there.
How useful are they for a driver to learn a track?
As he went through that section of corners, but he could get his 10th victory for McLaren this weekend. I mean, that was going to be a tough one up against the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari, who are looking to the favourites going into this weekend. So it proves his time always, so that all the F1 teams will have their just ahead of Lando Norris, but crucially missed out on the race in Australia with crashing out before the start. And again, that not just hampered his up and running throughout the entire weekend. So data gathering on one car, and for Oscar, it's getting used to all these systems in a race duration.
is teams practicing their qualifying layout of doing a fast lap, then a slow lap, and then a second flying lap. That's exactly what we're seeing Hamilton doing now. And he's gone faster in the first sector, but he's still way down in the middle sector, even though that's his best time so far. And there's only 28 minutes to go. Not much time to get those fast laps in now.
And it looked like a little bit of understeer for Lewis Hamilton towards the exit of turn 13. So you just had to hesitate with the throttle, and that's the last thing you want going onto that long back straight. Any hesitation, it's going to cost you those hundredths, building up to those tenths of a second. So the car doesn't look too crazy for Lewis, but doesn't, unless he's just not showing all his cards just yet. But that understeer certainly onto the back straight wouldn't have helped him at all.
Well, he's picked up the pace significantly and got within a tenth or 2/10 of a second of Charles Leclerc, who still remains quicker on those medium tyres than Hamilton is on the softs. George Russell, though, fastest overall in the Mercedes. Still a long way to go. It's just free practice 1 at Shanghai. Interesting spectacle for everybody, because very different circuit to the circuit we started the season out in Melbourne, and we're going very different again at next track out in 2 weeks' time at Suzuka for the Japanese Grand Prix. Home race for Honda. They've got a lot to do between now and then, with the Aston Martins of Lance Stroll and Fernando Alonso having a very limited number of laps. Stroll's been out on the softs, got 9 laps on the board, and Alonso 8, also been out on the softs, but we've not really seen much pace from them at all.
No, Carlos Sainz yet to set a time. He's in the garage with a data issue.
Did we reset my delta?
Hey, fam.
Well done.
So effectively, you'll have a delta on the dash, and they can put whatever lap time they might want into that delta. So whether the driver knows whether it's compared to their teammate, whether it's their personal best, even if they want up to George Russell and see where they're losing, how much time they're losing. It's a live delta. So let's say he breaks slightly early into turn 1, loses a couple of tenths, that's going to show on his dash. But back to Carlos Sainz, he'll be hoping that problem for Williams gets sorted pretty quickly, because again, remember, this is our only practice session of the weekend before heading into sprint qualifying later on.
Yeah, it's not been the best start for the season for Williams. They missed a lot of testing time at the start of the year before we'd even got to Melbourne, and they're still learning how to get the best out of the car. We know the car was a bit late, it's a bit overweight, but Sainz is now in the car, so hopefully we are going to see him out on track. If not, we'll send a roof down to go and have a closer look, see what's going on. But it does look like they are preparing that Williams to get out on circuit. I just wonder how much it set them back, because they haven't got decent setups. And one of the things you have to do with these power units, particularly these new power units, is when you're out on track, you have to adapt the modes. And here it talks about maps and modes. It's nothing to do with rambling in the mountains. It's to do with setting up the feel for the drivers and how that power is delivered. If you haven't done that, you can end up with something that's maybe a bit too aggressive or not aggressive enough. If it's too aggressive, Alice, you'll end up flicking your car all over the circuit.
Yeah, as a demonstration there from Piastri, getting the tail out at the final corner, jumps up into third. But when they say data issue, there's a lot of data that this car collects and passes on to the pit wall live data, and that is not running as it should. That's a risk of them sending them a car out on the track if there is an issue, as we see Oscar running wide. Was that? Obviously, it was not the lap he's just set. A similar issue to his teammate.
Oscar, both cars have had that snap quite regularly.
I'm just having a look if it's the wind. Probably would say, there's a little bit of a tailwind going into turn 1, but maybe seems more of a McLaren thing, seeing that Lando Norris has had that issue as well, albeit he had it slightly further round the corner. So a bit of a sigh of relief for Oscar when it knows it's happening to his teammate as well.
Moment on his fast lap as well, as he runs wide on the final corner, putting the wheel into the gravel. It's going to cost him a little bit of time, and going just 3/10 to finish off the fastest time so far. That's going to be quite encouraging for McLaren if they can keep it clean. There's clearly some pace in that car, but how much pace is up to second and is now finally quicker than Charles Leclerc? But I think the Monegasque driver is about to get some red tyres on his Ferrari too.
Able to do consecutive laps around here, even though it is hard on the tyres, as we've already touched on. It is cooler, these conditions, so they are able to do out and go do a cool lap, still have some life in the tyres. So that's it's a second or third push lap for Lewis Hamilton on those soft tyres, and at other circuits like Bahrain, that's hard to come by, isn't it? Usually it's that one lap and then the tyres are saying no more. So for him, jumps up into P2, but again, it doesn't look a particular handful, and we've not heard anything from obviously Lewis on the radio, so I wonder again if they're maybe not showing their full hand yet, as Carlos Sainz is on an outlap now, so hopefully the data issue for Williams has been solved.
That was the third push lap for Hamilton, but Perez with that new Delta on his dash, he was the faster of the two Cadillacs, but Valtteri Bottas has picked up the pace. Will we see more coming from Perez? Now, I'm wondering, with this being a sprint weekend, the tyre usage, and this is very much a Ruth Buscombe question, the tyre usage you pick as a team engineer will be very different, because you are very much limited in a different way to the way you normally would be on a race week. Could be a choice of mediums, but that's why you're seeing so many drivers out on the mediums at this point, because they don't have as much. But look at this on Hadjar's car. I was talking about the mediums. Look at that left front, Alice. That's a mess.
It's taken a beating, and I wanted to be slightly put off with Hamilton. I mean, Hamilton was way out the way, but we saw that from the Red Bull, didn't we, in Melbourne, and particularly McLaren as well, that front left took a beating, and clearly still taking a beating here. Let's have a look on the board. 14 laps from Isaac Hadjar, so that's slightly worrying if already that front left is starting to look like that. He's obviously not been doing consecutively push laps like you would in the race, so even with that, let's say if he's done half of those as a push lap, not looking good. And another driver getting a snap in a similar place to Oscar Piastri is Bortoletti.
Yeah, a huge amount of drivers getting caught out there, and I think you might have a case there. The wind speed isn't very high, but looking at the sort of the weather vane, it is pointing exactly there. So maybe the drivers are just getting caught out on their turn in and then flying off onto that runoff, and their left front is already under pressure. Why is it the left front that's suffering? Well, lots of long right-hand corners, and the load transfer means that you're loading up that outside tyre. So for a right-hand corner, you're loading up the right front. For a left-hand corner, you can see on the Williams here as well, sights out on track. You'll see as he turns in here, look at the surface of the tyre. It will start to discolour in a different way. It would do if the sun was shining in a different direction. And you start to see how the tyres perform differently. And when you're watching on an onboard camera, you look at the tyres left to right. You can quite often see through a race distance when a driver's about to start to struggle. And that's what you'll see a lot of engineers doing through a Grand Prix distance.
And making sure, particularly in these cooler conditions, okay, it's not ridiculously chilly, but I'd say 13 degrees air temp is, you want it slightly warmer, especially coming from Melbourne. That's going to have effect with bringing the tyres in. Yes, they've got tyre warmers, so that help. They're not going out on stone cold tyres, but still you want to have them, and we keep hearing an optimum window for the tyres, and just with these cooler conditions makes it slightly harder to get them up to temperature. And we can also maybe see cold grain, and maybe not too much in these track temperatures, 23 degrees, nearly 24 degrees. So we've seen colder conditions, but makes it trickier to get it really in that optimum window.
Before the Formula Academy session, which was the practice session before free practice 1, the actual air temperature was 8 degrees centigrade, which is in Formula 1 terms, it is, well, basically running the race at the North Pole. There is a minimum operational temperature for the tyres, which I think is about 8 or 9 degrees centigrade. Oh, that's, as you were pointing out, Alice, the state of that tyre on Colapinto's
You can see the rubber flying off of Colapinto's front left. Again, let's have a look how many laps he's got on the board. That's 17 laps, so a few more than Hadjar, but not good. It's going to be great data for collecting for the teams, but this is their last opportunity. They can't go, okay, roll it back into the garage for free practice 2, we'll make this adjustment to try and help things. They can't. They've got to take that risk now of maybe risking making an adjustment for the sprint race tomorrow, but of course they will take learnings from the sprint, which they can then carry over into the race from those slightly longer runs.
Well, it's cold as well. When it's colder, you do tend to see the tyres wear differently, but if it gets hotter, you do tend to see more tyre wear. The tyres give up quicker in hotter conditions, generally speaking. And you can really see it already on the Williams behind this Ferrari. You can start to see that left front going as well. And I wonder, are the tyres, is that left front going to be really marginal in performance terms for drivers to get to the end? And will anybody sort of roll the dice and try something different with their tyre choice just to get to the end and maybe open up a few windows for the Grand Prix on Sunday?
I mean, if you don't have a great qualifying in the sprint, for example, then yeah, rolling that dice. If you're slightly further down the order than we'd like, again, just to get that information for heading into the main Grand Prix on Sunday. But how many laps are we going to see Aston Martin circulate around, particularly for Fernando Alonso, out on the soft tyre at the moment? Personal best, but they're all the way down in 19th and 20th.
Well, Lance Stroll sort of finished the Australian Grand Prix. I mean, it was, shall we say, rather interrupted, but I think he was 12 laps down at the end of the Grand Prix, but most of those 12 laps he was spent in the pits, and actually that's a lot further than Aston Martin expected to be able to go. Honda have said there are some fixes already in force on the car, but whether they're going to be effective, they need to come here and find out, with a major fix expected in a fortnight's time at Suzuka, which I think could see the cars come up to, well, a slightly better performance window. But this is the issue, Alice, because Alonso's out on track, but he hasn't really driven this car enough to be able to get the best out of it.
No, and he had a huge whack of oversteer on the exit of turn 14, sorry. Across the line, doesn't move as high up as he certainly would have liked. But no, you're right, he's massively lacking in experience with this car. Experience in Formula 1, he's definitely not lacking in that, but he would have liked to have clocked up many more laps, particularly last weekend. He did 21 laps of the race.
Charles Leclerc looking at Charles Leclerc's forward-facing onboard camera. That's a strange one.
Can't say I've seen that before.
Not quite sure what he'd be learning from that. Well, coming up to quarter of an hour to go in free practice 1 here ahead of the Chinese Grand Prix at Shanghai International Circuit. George Russell in the Mercedes remains top of the time sheet with 19 laps completed ahead of the two Ferraris, Hamilton and Leclerc, with 17 laps apiece, though Hamilton has set times on the soft tyre and his teammate has not. Oscar Piastri in the McLaren in 4th, and Kimi Antonelli in the other Mercedes sits in 5th position. And then you're looking at Oliver Behrman impressing in 6th, also yet to run on the softs.
Ocon lacking a little bit, isn't he, behind his teammate, just under a second off Mr. Behrman. Gasly, pretty good showing from him, and I think he had a fairly decent race, I would say, for Gasly in the Alpine, getting his first points on the board of the season, and Alpine in a much better place than they were compared to this time last year. Obviously different power unit, Mercedes power unit in the back of the Alpine. Renault departing F1 again last year. Colapinto, though, slightly struggling. We've seen him have that spin, didn't we, on his outlet, that bizarre spin. Definitely that would have destroyed his tyres, and that front left on Max Verstappen's, that doesn't look nice. That's not healthy.
This is the story for tomorrow. This is absolutely going to be the story. The life of the left front tyre in the sprint is going to be a defining factor. These drivers are going to have to work hard to keep those tyres alive to the end of the sprint session, or potentially sacrifice a set of hards for Sunday's Grand Prix if they think they've got a good chance in the sprint. And I think if you've got a Ferrari power unit with that little tiny turbo and you've got great acceleration in the run down to turn 1, you might do something a little bit spicy to try to get the advantage. Speaking of spice, well, it's all pain at Alpine.
Yeah, we were just talking about them and how a good job that Gasly was doing. And another incident for Colapinto, this time just stopped in the pit lane, totally conked out, maybe trying to do a little bit of a reset, and The Alpine crew going for a little bit of a jog down the pit lane to try and retrieve him. That gives us a good look. The car stopped there with that front left. Maybe doesn't look as bad as Max Verstappen's Red Bull, but they'll want to put some fans on those brakes quite quickly.
Yeah, if the brakes are like most of the bits of the car, there are no fans in there, and if a F1 car's come in from a long run and just sits with the brakes there and they don't put fans on it, they will catch fire. So that's why the mechanics are dashing down there with what looks like very posh, which they are, very posh leaf blowers, and they bolt them onto the car, and then the car gets going and they have to run all the way back.
I think he did that on purpose, didn't he?
That's why they spend so much time in the
It is chilly conditions, so at least they'll be slightly warmer now. Back into the pits.
Alpine, with their first season without a Renault power unit, Renault pulling out of Formula One, largely due to poor performance, frankly, but to be replaced by Mercedes power units. Now, what happens here?
He's in neutral, so he's totally lost drive, gone into neutral. And then you can see total confusion from the McLaren team on the right-hand side as well. But managed to get it fired up, back into gear, and down into his pit box now. The moment we've been waiting for. George Russell out on a soft tyre.
Yeah, fastest in the first sector of anybody, fastest in the second sector, and looking pretty fast in the final sector. Talk us round through this final bit, Alice.
So, going through the long right-hander up onto this straight, you can see massively up already, nearly 9/10 of a second, and it's not easy, but George Russell is making it look easy. Pick your braking point. Just past 100 metres, getting the car turned in nicely, nice and gentle on the throttle, much nicer than we saw of the Aston Martin of Fernando Alonso, who was squirming all over the place. And then out of the final corner. Temptation to carry speed into turn 16. It's a very narrow exit on the exit there. And, wow, first driver easily into the 132s.
Well, picture in picture, we saw Lewis Hamilton was on a lap. Charles Leclerc also now has the soft tyres bolted onto his Ferrari. But we'll have a look at Hamilton's lap first of all. He set his best middle sector so far and is doing reasonably well in the final sector, but stays second overall for his best time of the day so far. Kimi Antonelli, though, pumping in a really quick lap in the other Mercedes, just 1/10 of a second behind his teammate Russell.
I mean, Hamilton will be, if that's all that Hamilton's got, then that's going to be hugely disappointing for him. 1.4 off. Charles Leclerc, personal best in the first, but not in the second sector. He would have liked to maybe picked up a little bit of a toe from the car in front. Hitting the brakes, turns in fairly nicely. And there, a bit squirmier on the exit compared to the Mercedes. A lack of traction there through the final corner. Not using as much of the road on the exit compared to his teammate. Does improve, but still 8/10 of a second off compared to George Russell. Yeah,
but for teammate rivalries, maybe 8/10 of a second off, but he's still quicker than his teammate, and that's sometimes all that matters, isn't it?
It is. It's a track that Lewis Hamilton's obviously gone very well at in the past, and he'll hope to continue that going into the remainder of the weekend. Won the most Chinese Grand Prix with 6 victories here. This is the replay, the final corner. Looks all right, but that off-board shot where we see the rear of the car touching as it goes through, this is probably a better angle. Kicking up the dust there, just scraping along the ground, and that was one of the things they got disqualified for here last year, wasn't it? Plank wear?
That's right, and underneath, it sounds very rustic, doesn't it? It sounds like something you find in the garden shed, but in the base of every single F1 car, there is, it used to be a wooden plank, it's not made of wood anymore, as George Russell is back out for another lap. We'll talk about that in a moment. But underneath the centre line of the car, to stop the cars running too low to the ground and getting an aerodynamic advantage, there is what we call the wooden plank. It's not made of wood anymore, it's something more sophisticated. But if you wear that down too much, the car will automatically become illegal and get disqualified. So we have seen issues with that for a number of drivers so far. But George Russell going quick. Let's hear what Hamilton has to say.
Give me a plan, mate.
Yeah.
I don't know where I am in the session.
So you are P3, still P3. Now Mercedes Manchester, they are 1.3 seconds ahead of us.
It was looking a bit better the lap, but lost it at the end.
Well, that's not what you want to hear, is it? Mercedes are 1.3 seconds faster than you. And a fairly calm response from Lewis Hamilton, saying he lost it in the end. It did look a handful on that last part. In 13th place, Antonelli, another personal best for him in the first sector, and a fairly decent middle section is about to cross the beam. Can he pip his teammate to the top of the time? It's going to be close. Russell improves, so now goes 2/10 clear of his teammate as we'll wait for Antonelli to cross the line.
Yeah, we're watching the Racing Bull making its way around. One driver we haven't spoken about so much yet, but also on their fastest lap on the soft tyre now, and setting some reasonably good times in the opening section of the lap, was Pierre Gasly in the other Alpine. He's been going well, but the final sector hasn't started out too well, as we see Lawson coming up to the line for his best time so far, and he managed to go 7th in the Racing Bull, which is pretty impressive for that car, but there's a lot more to come from a lot of cars, like these two battling Silver Arrows.
So I wonder if that was a mistake in the final sector there from Antonelli, or he just felt the time wasn't there, because lost a few seconds. It was looking good. He was looking very good to challenge and be even closer to his teammate. And Charles Leclerc has either decided that he wants to abort this lap, or he has a problem. I think by the look of him looking in his mirrors, he's deciding to abort that lap. So Lando Norris, let's see what he can do on the soft tyre, down in 9th place at the moment. You would have thought, Sam, this is going to boost him further up the order into the top 6. His teammate yet to set a time on the soft tyre as well.
Yeah, well, I think we haven't really seen what McLaren have got with this rule set, actually. They've admitted they're still trying to find the best ways around this Mercedes power unit. Norris moves up to 4th position with his best lap so far. But I think the teams, like McLaren particularly, are still learning how to get the most out of it. Max Verstappen, we've seen him down in the pits having the front end of his car quite significantly fiddled with. So I think either a little problem in that Red Bull or a bit more fettling needed to get the best lap time. But now he's back out on track. We'll see what this car's got. As I say, I think these Red Bulls have got really good straight line speed, and I think we are going to see quite a lot more of them once we get to see them just bed in a little bit with this new rule set.
But having to say, even watching from the onboards and the outboards, that Mercedes just looks so complete, doesn't it? From watching on board with George Russell, the traction out of that corner, that turn 14, and we'll see what Max Verstappen's is like, but it just looks so good. The high speed, it looks settled. The slow speed, it turns and rotates nicely. Not as much rotation there from Verstappen. Even there, lack of traction compared to the Mercedes. Let's see what it's like through the final corner. A bit of understeer compared to the Mercedes. Only pops him up into 7th, 1.8 seconds off, and that's not something we say very often, is it? Max Verstappen in 7th. Yeah, lacking pace in his Red Bull.
Looking at the detailed sectors there, Alice, it looked to me like Red Bull may be trying to optimise the corners a little bit more with the setup they've got on that car, rather than that straight line speed advantage we saw in Melbourne. So I wonder if they're just playing around trying to find different routes to make that speed on this very different circuit. Oscar Piastri, though, looking like he's on a pretty good lap right now.
Yeah, and comparing again to the Mercedes as they're the benchmark, it seems to be a lot more bottoming compared to the Mercedes from the McLarens, and you can even hear it on the onboard skipping across the ground. But actually a fairly good sector from Piastri, but already rear of the car snaking, front of the car getting that little bit of push, and you can hear it skipping a lot more. But Antonelli may have made a mistake in the last lap, but he's had a cool down, gone again and set the fastest first sector of anybody out on track.
You can see Antonelli in the Mercedes picture in picture. We'll watch both at the same time here and live as the free practice 1 session winds down into the final 5 minutes at Shanghai International Circuit. George Russell is at the top of the timesheets, but will he remain there? We'll have to wait and see in a few moments. Oscar Piastri moves up into 3rd position in the McLaren, deposing the Ferraris of Charles Leclerc and Lewis Hamilton, and his own teammate down to 4th, 5th and 6th position. Antonelli, though, he hasn't had the best start to the final sector, and his middle sector went away quite dramatically. So I wonder if there's been a little issue we didn't see, and we are getting a little notification that there may be some debris down on the track somewhere.
I think Piastri would be fairly happy with that lap. Okay, 0.7 of a second off, but he's popped it in front of the Ferraris, slightly closer than they maybe thought they would be. As before the start of the weekend, Piastri said, not too sure we're going to be much closer. As Albon jumps up to 13th. Sainz clearly got rid of his data issue, pops up to 14th.
Riding on board with Gabriel Bortoleto in the Audi. This is a car I think we still haven't learnt enough about. He's looking together, but again, losing a bit of time in the final sector.
Now, Norris across the line, improves in the last sector, but he just seems to be struggling a little bit compared to his teammates. Seemed like it was that in Melbourne, was obviously behind his teammate in qualifying, maybe not adjusting as he would have liked to these new regulations. Hadjar, though, what a weekend he had. Okay, didn't finish the race, but a fantastic qualifying session for him, and showed us potentially what the Red Bull can do. Let's have a look. 14th, so not ideal. Had a great weekend here last year, a circuit that he clearly enjoys driving, but lacking a little bit of pace compared to his teammate. Hello, Mr. Hulkenberg, up into 9th, getting the Audi working quite nicely, and that's a pretty strong showing so far from Audi in 13th and 9th.
This is a track he knows very well from endurance racing, having spent hours upon hours, quite literally pounding around this track in a sports prototype. And those sports prototypes of that era were heavy hybrids. So they did have the super clipping functionality, they did have all the energy recovery modes, so he's learned how to do that in a very different type of racing car, but on this very circuit. So perhaps he's got a few little tricks in his book that help him learn his way around this track in the Audi when he used to do it in a Porsche.
Lewis Hamilton's mum watching on, and Hamilton getting back into the car. He's not going to have time to do a push lap, but he needs to be on circuit to do the practice starts. So they'll have the opportunity. Can't do them at the end of the pit lane here in Shanghai, but they'll have the opportunity to do them. Not that Ferrari necessarily need start practice, because they were the strongest starters, you could say, out there, particularly at Melbourne. And when we saw the cars out in Bahrain doing those practice starts, pretty strong starters. Charles Leclerc not on for a personal best at the moment to himself, unless he finds something in this final sector. Improved in the first, not so much in that middle sector, as we see the fancy rear wing closing. Again, that traction that seems to be a real strong point for the Mercedes, not so much for the Ferrari. And a snap of oversteer to end the lap to go with it.
Yeah, I love how tricky these cars are to drive. I like seeing racing drivers struggle, and I mean, anyone who knows me and hanging around with Jolyon Palmer will know that, but it is good to see these drivers having to work for this, but it's a learning process, and that's what I love about these cars. With just 45 seconds left on the clock of this free practice one session, the team Mercedes are again leading the way in China.
Not only do you kick gravel across the track and destroy your lap, you kick it across the track for everybody else. So let's have a look for Charles Leclerc. Already we saw the rear of the car snaking out of the hairpin, and just a little bit of understeer, a front end bit, and then that kicks the rear out, and no room for error down there at the final corner. You could see out onto the gravel, that gets strewn across the track. And was it Oscar Piastri was the next driver round to collect up some of that gravel? He did improve though, did Oscar, only slightly. Let's check a flag is out, and that is our only practice session of the weekend. Sam, done.
Well, free practice one is over in Shanghai. George Russell leads ahead of Kimi Antonelli, both of the Mercedes 1 and 2. Oscar Piastri, third position. Charles Leclerc, well, I went too early because Lando Norris just improved his time on the very final lap, jumped into third position ahead of Oscar Piastri in his car. And there's still some lap times coming in, actually. Colapinto is out on a decent lap, so we'll call him across the line as he's just into that final sector, and we could see a little bit of an improvement there from the Alpine driver. And it's an interesting run here to see just a few people putting it in right at the end of the session here in Shanghai. And it's, well, it wasn't actually a big improvement there for Colapinto, was it? Coming across the line, finishing the session in 14th position. Still out on a lap. Tricky time there for the Red Bulls. Hadjar jumping up there. Max Verstappen up to 8th as the session comes to a conclusion. A bit more work there to do, Alice, for the Red Bull team, I think.
There is. They'll be disappointed with that, but I tell you what, McLaren, I think they'll be fairly happy. I said that about Oscar Piastri, sorry, who'd be pretty pleased. And I said that Lando Norris was struggling to maybe get his head around this new car, but he's pulled something out towards the end. But that man, George Russell, with the new special helmet, which I quite like actually, suits him, will be pleased. But at the moment, it's, of course, Mercedes leading the way.
Well, there'll be some smiles in Brixworth in Northamptonshire in England as well. That's where the Mercedes power units are designed and built. And it's not just the Mercedes 1-2. The cars in 3rd and 4th also have that Mercedes power unit in the back of them. The 2 McLarens ahead of the 2 Ferraris. And then Oliver Behrman in the Ferrari-powered Toyota-sponsored Haas is sitting in 7th position ahead of the Ford-branded power unit in Max Verstappen's Red Bull and Nico Hülkenberg in the Audi. Then the next Mercedes unit is in 10th position. So a pretty solid performance from the Mercedes power units so far, and that's been the story of the season so far. But will anybody come along and break that Mercedes dominance? Well, as we see a replay of Oliver Behrman at the end of free practice 1 here in Shanghai, well, that's not gone well for him, has it, Alice?
No, and that is almost similar there to what that's just in front of Stroll. It's what we saw with Piastri, with that torque kicking in, maybe a bit of extra electrical power as well, and around he went. He was offline on the dirty part of the track on the inside there. A nice avoidance from Lance Stroll as the drivers line up to do their practice start. This longer procedure. Can't launch off the line if you've got a car in front of you on the practice start. Have to wait for the car to go. Into gear for Charles Leclerc. Revs rise. He's got to wait for the Alpine in front of him to move. It's a long hold for the Alpine. There we go. The Alpine's away, and I expect now Charles Leclerc release the clutch, and off he goes. Nice start by him.
And everybody's going to ask already, I can hear it at home, why is there so much smoke coming out of the back of the Ferrari? That's entirely normal, actually. That's the oil tank breather system, and the cars do that all of the time. All of the cars have the breathers. Though this year the Ferrari does seem to be smoking a little bit more than some of the others, but it's nothing unusual. Ferrari starts, though, are still a big focus of attention, and I think on this long run down to turn 1, it's going to be very, very exciting.
Wasn't it? It was a nice start there from Piastri. Obviously, with these practice starts, they've got decent amount of tyre temperature in. They've been pounding around. So your practice starts at the end of the session are usually, I would say, slightly easier than if you were doing you start at the very start of the race due to that tyre temperature. And of course, with these new regulations, it makes it harder for the drivers to generate that tyre temperature with the battery recharging. Not wanting to use too much on the formation lap, but that's our only practice session of the weekend done. And of course, George Russell, winner last time out in Melbourne, tops the time sheet, fraction of a second ahead of his teammate Kimi Antonelli. Lando Norris with a late charge to put himself into 3rd place, just in front of his teammate Oscar Piastri. Charles Leclerc, disappointing session, I would say, for the Ferraris. 8.5 tenths back in 5th. Hamilton in 6th. Behrman, good showing by him. Verstappen in 8th place with Hülkenberg there down in 9th. Gasly in the top 10. From Lawson, Bortoletto in the 2nd Audi. Isaac Hadjar, Esteban Ocon, the 2nd Haas. 2.1 off for Russell. Colapinto, couple of spins for him, and stopping in the pit lane was still able to get it in 15th. Alex Albon, Carlos Sainz, who had that data issue in the start of the session. Alonso, Bottas, Lance Stroll, Arvid Lindblad, unfortunately not taking part in much of the session, and Sergio Perez down in 22nd place. So that's it for our final, our only, shall I say, practice session as we're going to head down into the paddock where Betty and the crew will be able to round up that practice session before we head into sprint qualifying later on this afternoon.
Hello everybody and welcome down to the paddock here in Shanghai. It is sunny, we've got blue skies. It's a nice warm temperature now. We've had 1 hour of practice as expected. It was a pretty frantic session. All of the teams trying to get as much learnings and squeeze as much as they possibly can out of that 1 hour. Ruth, what was the big thing that you've noticed? Is it front graining?
Other than Ferrari blasting the Macarena out of their garage before the start of FP1, yeah, the graining was severe. And it's one of those things you can visually see on the tyres, the front left on the medium tyre, which was the same compound that suffered with the graining in Melbourne. Now, this track is going to be one that's tough on graining anyway. This session is going to be the worst for graining. But if it doesn't clear up, it could be a key theme in the race. That's the tyre we expect them to do the whole sprint on and also at least stint one of the race.
So that could be a little bit of an issue. Chris, talk to us about Ferrari, other than the fact that they were blasting the Macarena out of the garage, which is absolutely excellent, by the way. Love it. A bit of drama for Lewis Hamilton early on.
Yeah, big spin there, and obviously the timing of it, you're watching the rear wing and going, it's just as the rear wing closes. Was that something to do with it? But yeah, heavy rear locking. The problem there is obviously ruined a set of tyres, so that's really going to hurt that run plan and puts you on a back foot. But it must affect the driver's confidence too, that early on when they're really attacking a braking zone, what am I going to get? So that probably did disrupt things a little bit, but there was some better running towards the end of the session. He said the end of one lap didn't go quite so cleanly and he felt there was more to it. This will be a gap now ahead of sprint quali where they really want to just piece together the good bits of everything that they saw and iron out the bad bits.
We also had a virtual safety car, Ruth, didn't we, with Arvid Lindblad, the Racing Bulls rookie. What happened there? What went wrong?
Yeah, absolutely frenetic session. Multiple VSCs, wasn't there? We had Franco in the pit lane, we had Lindblad out on plat. Honestly, they were one of the 6 teams that broke curfew last night to get the cars ready. That Red Bull Ford power unit has had issues last week. Isaac Hadjar with the Red Bull, the sister team, had the DNF in the race on lap 11. And it looked, honestly, like a power unit issue. Lindblad himself went straight over to the pit wall to chat with team principal Alan Permain and his race engineer to do a debrief. It's going to be a case of trying to diagnose what the problem is. Potentially an electrical cutout. They're not going to know till they get the car back, which is gutting for them because every lap and every second counts.
Yeah, I mean, rookie, sprint weekend, painful for him to lose that running here. Really, really costly. Doesn't have FP2 to get back up to speed and learn this track.
Yeah, and you talk about confidence earlier. I wonder if that might knock him just slightly, not getting all of those extra laps in. 6 laps, though, guess it's better than nothing. Let's head over to Sam Collins in the studio then. Sam, what did you notice?
There was all sorts of stuff, Betty, thank you. And actually, I just want to pick Ruth up on that, talking about the curfew. That's really good information. I hadn't picked up on that. So to explain that, a lot of teams, or every team in Formula One, is limited on how much time they're allowed to spend at the racetrack. So the mechanics basically don't get too tired and work all night. Poor little mechanics. But nonetheless, it's actually really important. But teams are allowed to break that curfew a certain number of times per season. And when they do it, it means they have to take something really seriously. So that is a sign that something untoward is happening. And speaking of untoward things happening, this happened earlier in the session. And I actually want to think that both drivers here, Lando Norris and Lewis Hamilton, were a little bit lucky not to get a stern talking to from race control for this moment earlier in the session. You can see the 2 cars pick up damage in that little wheel-to-wheel moment. Now, Norris clearly thinks Hamilton's going slow, he's got the corner, then the 7-time world champion says, nah, you're only a 1-time world champion, I'm going to get off down there. But there is contact between the McLaren and the Ferrari, and I think the Ferrari picked up a little bit of damage from that. And that was probably a slightly unnecessary moment. And we've seen a few unnecessary moments up and down the field, and one of them, hopefully this is the clip here, where we saw the rear wing of the Ferrari working in a different way than the driver expected. When it opened up, the car caught out Lewis Hamilton because it closed in a different way. And as you can see, these rotating wings have a different mode of operation, and the drivers are still getting used to exactly how to best use it when the wings close and they turn into the corner. But it is a spectacular thing to see here on Charles Leclerc's car. And that is what Ferrari are working through, how to get the best out of it. But as we ride on board with the McLaren here, we can start to see the first corner here of the circuit is beginning to catch out a lot of drivers. It's not just a wind effect. You can see here the driver getting crossed up, going off the circuit. And this is going to be super important at the start of the sprint, because if the wind is still in the same direction, you're going to see a lot of cars sliding wide and coming off the track like that. And that is going to be a real challenge for a lot of teams and drivers. And going into the qualifying session, the sprint qualifying session later today, I think we're going to see a lot more of it. But other drivers are going to have other problems to overcome, such as this, the Alpine simply conking out in the pit lane. We'll have to wait and see exactly what the issue was for the pink and blue car. McLaren probably wondering exactly what it is, and it just simply stopped in the pit lane, caused a bit of a blockage, and, well, a little bit of a research team for the team to do. Well, coming up for the rest of the weekend, we've got so much on-track action in China. We've just had free practice, one with Russell, the only free practice session of the weekend so far, and you're only going to get. Then sprint qualifying at 3:10 local time. That is going to be thrilling to see how those drivers really do get these cars around the track very well. Then on Saturday, tomorrow, the Prix sprint show is at 10:15, followed by the sprint itself. Tune in for that. It's going to be on-track racing. The run to the first corner there, I think, is going to be really, really revealing. Following the sprint, whenever it finishes, is the post-sprint show, essential viewing of all of the latest news and analysis. Then the pre-qualifying show, because it's relentless in China, 14:25 local time, followed by qualifying itself at 1500, and the post-qualifying show. And then the pre-race show on Sunday, 13:50, 10 to 2, before the Grand Prix itself kicks off at 3 o'clock, and then the post-race show following that. By the time we get to the post-race show, well, hopefully my fantasy F1 team is doing a bit better than it was last time out. I lost quite a lot of problems. I lost quite a lot of points, rather, when down to some unreliability from some of the cars out there, and I did have Isaac Hadjar in there, who performed fantastically. I'm very keen to meet Joe Palmer and some of the others. You can join and see how we perform on F1 Fantasy yourself by signing up on f1.com. Well worth doing, and it's a really fun game that's free to play. Well, there's so much more to see here in China, and there's some analysis I want to get into, actually, but there's just too much data going on, and there's lots of little details. For example, the Haas team is a team that I want to take a closer look at through the rest of the day. Hopefully we'll bring that to you a little bit later, but they've copied Ferrari's exhaust technique that we've seen so far from testing, and they are getting a bit more pace out of that car. But here we are on board with the Red Bull of Isaac Hadjar, out on track and coming up to this corner. And again, but what I wanted to draw your attention to, actually, I'm going to go back a little bit, because I think this is going to be the story of the sprint. Have a look here at the left front tyre on the Red Bull. It looks all right as he approaches the corner. It just looks like he comes into the braking zone. You start seeing what David Coulthard calls an under rotation. He starts to lock up the wheel, and you'll start to see how ragged and damaged the tyre looks. And the section I want to draw your attention to is just on the inner shoulder. And this is what you've got to keep an eye out for in testing. This is what we call blistering or tyre. It's not just straight up tyre wear. It's where the tyres